everybody, and welcome to another episode of your Bish Therapist podcast. I am your host, Melissa Reich, your Bish Therapist, a real-life therapist turned pop culture aficionado, serving clinical interpretations and hot takes on all things pop culture. And today's episode is going to be about, well, I'm going to talk a little bit about Potomac, but mostly what I'm going to talk about today is Monica Garcia went on the Viall Files podcast, and I am going to talk about that because first of all, it was 3 hours long and it was exhausting to listen to. If I'm being honest, that's a long time to take in any content, if I'm being honest, especially the way that Monica speaks. And I try to increase the speed because Nick kind of speaks slow, which, listen, no shade to that because sometimes people say I speak slowly too. For me, the speed of which I talk is less important as what is actually coming out of my mouth. So for me, it's, brain fog, right? I can only speak as quick as I can formulate the thoughts. So I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm not saying Nick should either, but I turned up the speed because he speaks slowly, but then Monica doesn't. So she kind of sounded like a chipmunk. It was quite an experiment. So, but I'm back after my week respite. Thank you all so much for your birthday wishes and your cancerversary wishes. I appreciate you all. I missed you all. I'm so glad that I'm back. It was so sweet. People messaged me and they're like, we didn't see an episode this week. Like, so cute. So I'm back. I'm here. I missed you all. Thank you so much for the support. Before I get into it all, I will say it was a wild. So I turned 43 on April 4th, and then April 6th was my 25-year cancerversary from my first cancer, which was ovarian. And some interesting things is that, as we age, our birthdays are a gift. Aging is a gift not given to all. But I will say that, the quality of birthdays definitely shifts as we get older. Because, my husband and I, we had all these grand plans. It was amazing. And then we had a natural disaster here. We had very bad storms, and a tree impaled a transformer and nobody fixed it for 24 hours. And then our sump pump backups failed. And so, long story short, I spent my birthday in a cold, dark home, going to Lowe's to buy a generator so that our basement didn't flood. And then we're setting it up and our basement is flooding. Thankfully the damage from that was minimal. And yeah, it was a wild, listen, it was one for the books. My husband and I, we joke that I will never forget it. So I'm just grateful to be here, and I'm just, excuse me. One thing I will say too is that, so my husband has the plague, as do many people around me. So I'm trying to get this in the can as my voice is dying, because I can tell that I'm getting, whatever it is he has, which, when you live with someone and you're together 24/7, he works from home, I work from home. And so, this is life, y'all. So before I get into talking about Monica and Nick, the podcast, the one thing that I do want to say is I started on Instagram. I started kind of doing subscriptions and things like that. So if you are on Instagram, and I've started kind of like a group chat for, just people to have a kiki and have a good time. I've named it the Bishes. And so if you're on social media and you're interested in that, please check that out. And the reason that I say that is these notes that I'm about to share with you, I shared that with them first. So some of the perks of being a subscriber is you just get access to kind of my brain and this, more importantly, the stuff that comes out of it, the wild, wacky stuff, prior to, a more cleaned up version that I will either post on social media or things like that. And one of the things I talked about was Potomac, because here's what I'll say about Potomac. If you're not on Instagram, maybe I can do some episodes where I just like read some of my Instagram posts, because I really do put a lot of thought into them. But the long and the short of it is with Potomac. So today, Robin Dixon came forward and said that she was fired. And it's like, well, yeah, you don't care about anything. Juan Dixon doesn't want to show up, which is probably part of the contract, right? So if she signs a contract, she's probably, I don't know how that works, but my point is that I wouldn't be surprised if she was fired because Juan just doesn't care about showing up for his wife. Time and time again, he's shown that. And so, again, if you're on Instagram, I gave a really broad read about some of the women. But what I'll say here is that it is time for a change, because watching the 3 parts of that reunion was torturous. Watching every single woman not want to take accountability, not want to take ownership, be stubborn, dig their heels in. Andy tried, here's what I would say to Sir Andy Cohen, is that he tried so hard to get these women together and they wanted no part of it. And so for me, what I'll say is that as a new therapist, we have to learn the hard lesson of we cannot work harder than our client, or clients or family or whatever it is. And so this to me was a case of Sir Andy Cohen working harder than the ladies, and none of them were interested in it. And I just thought, you know what? I feel that their collective stubbornness is the reason why we all are feeling stuck with Potomac. Okay. So stuck meaning like somebody has to give somewhere, with Candace and Giselle or Wendy and anybody, especially NECA. Like we all have to be able to give a little bit, and none of them are willing to give at all. So I'm glad, it's sad because Potomac used to be one of my favorite franchises. And so now Robin's fired. Candace announced she was leaving. Also, Candace announced that she was pregnant, which is a sensitive, I don't know. I know it's sensitive for me always when I see that. It's just kind of like, oh, I'm happy for her, but it always just hits that grief in me, which I guess is just a forever thing. I have no idea. But if you're feeling that too, you're not alone. But the greatest thing to come out of this reunion was for Gordon to bravely share his story about being diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder. And so I used the opportunity, because this is initially truly why Your Bish Therapist started, right? Is to talk about these concepts that are talked about on reality TV, and like no other pages are talking about, the bipolar disorder and things like that. So that's my niche. This is where I come in. So I'll just say briefly that in graduate school, one of the books that we had to read as we were learning about the different mental health disorders was called An Unquiet Mind by K. Redison James. K. James Redison. Of course, I'm butchering it now. I have it somewhere in my notes. I don't have time to look for it, but it's called An Unquiet Mind, and it is truly one of the best books to help you understand bipolar disorder. It is a very terrible disease that is so severe and has such challenges associated with it. And so I was so proud of Gordon, and I just send him and Mia so much love and support in this diagnosis, because first of all, to have a Black man talk about a mental health diagnosis, bravo, just bravo, because we don't have enough men, and especially men of color, talking about their mental health. And so Gordon, for me, is a trailblazer in this. I'm so proud of him. And he has no idea, I think, how much he's really helped people by being able to say, listen, this is my diagnosis. He cried as he said it, and so did I. I cried with him and Mia. And you know what? Here's the thing. I was never a huge Mia fan until the way she shows up for Gordon. She said, she's with Inc. now. And I guess, her and Gordon had this agreement, right? That Mia could be with somebody else and it was with consent. And so I'm not going to judge that, right? Because everyone's relationships are different. And so as long as all parties consented to this, fine. But Mia is with Inc. now, but she cried and she said, I will always take care of Gordon. And so for me, huge, props to Mia and respect that no matter the state of their marriage, she will be taking care of this man. And what I love most about that is for all of these people who are really hard on Mia about, being a gold digger and things like that. Well, she shed that real quick, right? Because the truest act of love is when you don't need anything from someone and you show up for them anyway. And in fact, Mia has been supporting Gordon. So she said, and Gordon actually said, by the way, that so the behavior that led him to be removed from his family's business was because of the bipolar disorder. So what I will say is there's bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. And the difference between 1 and 2 is the severity of the mania and the duration. So usually bipolar 1, there's going to be a more severe mania and then depression. So more severe peaks and valleys. And in bipolar 2, the mania is less severe and it's less, the duration of it is less. So someone with bipolar 1 could have a manic episode that lasts for weeks. Someone with bipolar 2 might have a manic episode last for days. And again, everybody's different. So I'm just using that as a example. But Gordon talked about, he had to be psychiatrically hospitalized, which I'm so grateful he talked about that because so many people with bipolar disorder, it's an issue with your brain, with your biology. And so, what I talked about on Instagram is that just as cancer has symptoms, so do mental health issues. And so the reason why I am so empathetic and understanding is because when you've had the honor of working with amazing people who are just sick and you see how a mental health issue or a substance abuse issue takes away their shine, and then they get it back because they cope with their illness. That is why I'm such an advocate. That is why I am doing what I'm doing. Because I just think that sometimes people are quick to pathologize or quick to be harsh about, Gordon and Mia, for example, in that episode that aired before part 1 of the reunion, he was behaving erratically. He was name calling. He was doing all these things. But guess what? He was in a manic episode. And so I was able to recognize that something wasn't right, but I wasn't sure what it was. And I didn't want to comment on it because I just have to be mindful too, right? It's not, I write a fine ethical line here. And I also just want to remember people's humanity. I don't want to be talking about people in ways that they wouldn't appreciate. I do try to talk in ways that if Gordon or Mia or Monica or Nick heard this, I would say it to their face. That's personally how I work. So just sending so much love to Gordon, so much love to Mia. Anyone dealing with bipolar disorder, you are not alone. Resources are available. I listed some of those on my Instagram page. Again, for those looking to kind of understand a historical account of what it is to live with this disease, An Unquiet Mind is an amazing book to read. And I just, I wish Gordon and Mia nothing but the best. And to be honest, I hope we get to see more of his story because it's just really valuable and important. So without further ado, let us move on to the Viall Files podcast. So here's the main reason that I'm going to be talking about this today is that I was listening to it. And again, there was so much information that on my Instagram page, Your Bish Therapist on Instagram, I posted the content and there was so much content, right? I do these slides and I write some words and I posted content about it, but there was so much that I wasn't able to share just because it was too much, right? A, it was too much content, but B, there was so much subtext and so much, so many like observations that I had that I really wasn't able to share that way. So I thought, let this be my first podcast back from my birthday and my week off. So unless you've been living under a rock, what you know by now is that, Nick and Monica had teased this huge announcement, that it was going to break news and blah, blah, blah. And listen, it did. But the announcement was that Monica is unexpectedly pregnant with her 5th child. She's 39. The father is her boyfriend, who's 29. His name is Braxton, which is such a 29-year-old name, right? We're having like, a generation of these kids, Braxton, Thaxton, Haxton, I don't know. And listen, I love the name Braxton. It's just, it's wild to see how different the names are in different generations. Like for me, I know so many people named Melissa. Melissa was like the name of the 80s. I mean, boring and basic, but I love my name. But I digress. And I'm seriously, this is what happens to me when like I can tell I'm not feeling well and my body's starting to do something. I'm just like trying to do the best I can. So here's the interesting thing about Braxton. He manages the property where they filmed the snowmobiling scene last season. So they met like while she was doing that scene, I guess, and they've been dating for a year. And here's a couple of interesting things that I clocked on this. So she literally cried as she talked about this because you can tell that she is terrified, which I'm like, you know what? Okay, I'm going to give her that. That's an appropriate response, right? Like most of the people that have asked me for my feedback on this are asking me because they're not fans of Monica and they're concerned about her child. And here's what I will say. I think that Monica is a very sweet person. I think she has a big heart. I just think that she has so much trauma that she is developmentally stuck. I kind of talked about this when I talked about Rachel Leviss. When I was on her podcast, I just noticed that the way that she speaks is very developmentally stunted. And I feel the same about Monica. So here's the thing about Monica. Monica's not a bad person. I think she's a great person with a good heart who has had a relationship with her mother that has severely impacted her, which I'll talk about that in a minute. And I think as a result, she makes terrible decisions. And so, yes, do I worry about how her behavior impacts her children? Sure. But she loves those kids. And I'm never going to like say that because someone has trauma, they're not a good parent, right? We can't be so reductive as to say that. Do I have concerns? Sure. But when I heard Monica talk about her fears, it actually made me feel better because she's really thinking about this. She's really taking account of, wow, I'm 39. And so as a 39-year-old, it is a geriatric pregnancy, which is wild, by the way. Because there are women who have babies well into their 40s. But I just, I guess our bodies are still back in olden times where we're meant to have kids at like 18. I have no idea. But it's wild to me. And she's right. It's a geriatric pregnancy. And so there's risk for her. There's risk for the child. And so here's what I'm going to say is that I wish her nothing but the best. I wish her a happy and healthy pregnancy. I wish her child, just the most amazing health, wealth, prosperity, and happiness. And, TBD, we'll see what happens. I feel that sometimes people who have been through a lot of trauma end up becoming the best parents because they don't want to perpetuate. They're so aware of the abuse and the stuff with their parents that they work extra hard to not perpetuate that. And so that's what I'm hoping is the case for Monica, because let's face it, we can all guess how she might be as a parent, but we don't really know. Okay. We don't really know. And so the way she's talked about her children, she adores them. She's their biggest advocate. I just think, Excuse me. I just think Monica needs to learn to be her best advocate. So we'll see about that. And then the other thing that I want to say is on Instagram, I did post this information about Monica talked about she was on birth control. And so she was just like shocked that she was pregnant. She was not trying to get pregnant. And so I kind of did a PSA on my Instagram that there are a lot of medications that can impact the way women, what's the word that I'm looking for? The way they process their birth control medications. So there are tons of meds out there that can prevent you from fully absorbing the birth control properly, like digestive enzymes in your stomach, things like that. And so a listener had actually said that they heard rumblings or something that, Monica was on Ozempic or one of the GLP-1 inhibitors. And so I did a little digging on that. And so there's this phenomenon called Ozempic babies. And this is no shade to anyone who's on a GLP-1 or anything like that. It's just information is that I was not aware that there's a thing called Ozempic babies, which is like people are on Ozempic and they're on birth control. And there's something about the GLP-1 inhibitor that is causing issues with the birth control. So I truly just wanted to do it as a PSA. This is no shade towards Monica or anyone taking any of those medications. For example, I'm on immunotherapy and there's a million medications I can't take, but one of them is, or like natural things I can't take, grapefruit. I cannot have any grapefruit because grapefruit juice or any sort of grapefruit, there's a reaction with the enzymes in terms of like how my body breaks down the immunotherapy, and like the grapefruit juice can interact with my medication and then cause like an accidental like overdose. And so just a little information from me to you, always check contraindications of medication while you're taking it. Because for me, I feel like this goes back to what I'm saying about Monica being her own best advocate is like, when we're taking a medication that may impact our birth control, we need to be aware of that, to prevent situations that create a lot of stress and drama for us. So just a side note there. Okay, so I'm going to move on because we're already 22 minutes in and I have so much more to say. So Nick called Monica out on her troll account because here's the wildest thing to me. I know a lot of people in the Bravo world have issues with Nick because he isn't necessarily a Bravo podcast, but he has a lot of Bravo people on and gets a lot of scoops over other actual Bravo podcasts. And so, just to give you guys a peek behind the curtain, there's a little bit of like, some people just don't like that. And some people don't like him. And here's the thing that I will say. I think Nick is a good interviewer. I think he's interesting. I think he asks good questions. I think he's a good conversationalist. But he definitely has his stances on things. And what I don't appreciate is that when people kind of talk about topics that they're saying, like, I know I'm not an expert about this, but they're talking about it as if they're an expert, that kind of gives me pause. And so I do believe that Nick did that. And I'm going to go into that in a little bit. But my point is that Nick had talked a lot of shit about Monica, like a lot. And he did admit that to her. But I do just find that wild that like Monica's on this podcast, kind of making herself accountable. But, there were some times where Nick might have been a little harsh or, contradictory. So he talked endless shit about this woman. And now he's kind of like confronting her about her troll account because he believes that he would be really hurt by that, as I think literally anyone on the planet would be. And so Monica's response was just very like stubborn and childlike, speaking of the Potomac women stubbornness. And let me be clear, stubbornness is just like an immature response, right? Like maturity is having a point of view and then getting other information and being willing to at least see the other point of view. And I think that the women of Potomac and Monica are good examples of sometimes how emotional immaturity can get in the way of that. So Monica says, I've never been in their homes. I don't know them. I didn't care about them. The women were good at making it about them. And then Monica said, and I quote, bitch, I didn't care about you. This is about Jen. So Monica essentially doubled down on her actions and did not apologize about the troll account. She continued to justify her behaviors and said that she doesn't understand why the women were upset because they were fans of the page. So Monica essentially just went on to talk about how these women were essentially fans of the page and how specifically Heather, and this, by the way, these are Monica's words. These are not mine. I'm not alleging anything. This is what Monica said, is that Heather and Lisa Barlow are just as dirty as Monica in terms of like Monica alleges that they use other accounts to push stories, that Lisa Barlow pays for stories, that Heather has been significantly involved in the troll account Reality Von Tease, which, by the way, that is the troll account that we're talking about, which I'm sure many of you know, but if you don't, that's what we're talking about. So Monica made this troll account with 5 other people to try to hold Jen Shah accountable because she was literally ripping off elderly people. And she is exactly where she needs to be. And to be honest, I am still so irritated that there's still so much talk about Jen. So I'm going to be talking about her very sparingly because I've seen pictures from jail and it seems like, I don't know if Jen's learning her lesson or not, but what she did was low down and disgusting. And, so what Monica's saying is, I started this troll page with 5 other people. We agreed to take this to the grave. And we were never going to say anything about who did it. But the whole point of it was to take Jen down, which, let me be really clear on something. When the federal government is involved, they don't need Monica driving by Jen's house to gather intel. They don't. So I'm just going to say that. Now, do I believe Monica felt that they did? Yes, I do believe that she felt that. So some of her interesting claims here was that Monica said she was fired because the cast got together and refused to film with her, which, by the way, I totally believe. And if I'm being honest, is a huge mistake. And so I'm going to be mindful about how I say this, but I do, first of all, a huge mistake on Bravo's part is because if Monica was back next season, I would have watched, and I won't be watching now because I believe Heather and Lisa are everything that Monica says. And I absolutely refuse to watch Mary. I absolutely refuse. Mary has been asked back to be a full-time cast member. I have an episode that I did on Mary. It is season 1. I don't know the exact episode. I'll try to find it in my notes, but it's called There's Something About Mary. I did a deep dive about Mary Cosby and all of the atrocious things that she's done and her family and things like that. And so I won't be watching Salt Lake City, but if Monica was back, I would have. And I think that Bravo made a huge mistake there. And to be honest, I've always felt like the Salt Lake City cast, and listen, this may sound harsh, but this is how I feel. I feel like they're fans. I feel like they're the only franchise. They're kind of new-ish. They're old enough to be fans of the show, but they just got in at a weird time, I feel. And in my opinion, there's not a lot interesting about many of the women. I love Whitney. I do think Whitney's a real one. And actually, Monica did say that. She's like, Heather and Lisa Barlow were really involved with the troll account, but Whitney had nothing to do with it. And I think Whitney's great. I think she's a real one. But I just am not going to, we can only control where our time, attention, and money goes to. And my time and attention is going to be for other things. I'm sorry. I can't do it. But here's the thing with Heather. So there's another person involved. Her name is Tanisha. Okay, so Tanisha was one of the people who founded the troll page with Monica. They were best friends for a really long time. Monica says, I still don't know why she flipped on me so hard, but Tanisha is Heather's hairdresser, and a hairdresser to some of the women on the show. And so Monica claims that Heather asked Tanisha to post things on her behalf to expose Jen in 2021. And Monica claims that Tanisha has dirt on Heather, and Heather owes Monica a thank you note for not sharing the dirt. I mean, here's the thing I'm going to say about that. I know a lot of dirt too, but for me, my morals and ethics is just that you're never going to hear it. I've talked to Bravo Lebs who have, let me just say this. I have information, but I just won't share it. And that's my morals and ethics. And I'm sure that's very disappointing to the people listening. But if I talk to a Bravo Lab or if I DM with someone, you're not going to hear about it, because I just think that's respectful of someone's privacy. So here's the big thing of why Monica says that she feels like she shouldn't have to apologize. So in 2021, Jen sent a cease and desist to people behind the Reality Von Teese account, and Monica was named publicly, meaning that the ladies and everyone else knew about the account. Okay. So here's my thing then. Here's my question for Monica. If that was the case, then why not just go into this saying, hey, ladies, you know me, I know you. Why not just call it out? Here's the thing with Monica. I believe that there are kernels of truth in what she's saying, but then there's always another story. Okay. So for example, with the pregnancy thing, I'm going to give an example here. She tells the story over and over that she went to urgent care. She found out she was pregnant. She cried on the floor, but then she posted a video where she took like 100 pregnancy tests. She videoed herself and then she released it. So which is it? How did you find out? Was it the video where you took 17 pregnancy tests and then you posted it to your Instagram and your social media? Or was it on the floor of the urgent care? Do you see what I'm saying? So that's people's frustration with Monica, is that there's kernels of truth, but then around it, there's a lot of yuck. So Monica cleared up that the casting did not know about Reality Von Teese. Now, she claims in the final steps of casting, production came to her home for an interview and she quote unquote discussed it with them. But those three people were gone a year later. She claims different production people were there when she was cast. Nick asked about this and she wasn't able to be clear about what she said and why no one ever acted on the info. So that's just another example. It's like, that doesn't make sense. So you're telling me people from production heard about this troll account and just like never said anything or did anything with it? It's just, there's missing puzzle pieces and I don't understand. And the only person she feels she owes an apology to, which this blew my mind, she feels she owes Jen an apology for how hard she went and for starting the burner page. What? So you don't owe any of the other women an apology who just, listen, I'm not saying their hands are clean, but they're not Jen. Jen defrauded people. She defrauded elderly people and the government, which kind of who cares, but like people, elderly people, that is like, I take care of my 96-year-old grandfather, my 94-year-old grandmother. They're the light of my lives. And I would just murder. Okay, not really, folks. I'm just saying that is crazy. But that's Monica for you. And that's, to me, why she doesn't make sense. So Nick asked her, why did you become a housewife? And again, here's flip-flopping. She said, I needed the check. I didn't need the fame. I just wanted the money. And then Nick called her out on the unlikely truth of this, is because he's like, Monica, there's a million other things you could have done for money. And she said, and then she admitted, I was a fan, not for fame, but as a fan to experience it. I don't do well with fame. And then she started crying about the trolls. And then she said getting casted was a dream. Okay, so I literally had to pause it and then re-listen and write down these quotes, because the problem with Monica is she's very contrarian. So she'll say one thing and then it just flies in the face of another. And it's like, listen, of course there's some aspect of the fame that she really enjoys. And I believe that because of the relationship with her mom and because of not getting the love that she needs, fame probably feels really great. And listen, I'm sure people have been insanely mean to her. I've seen people be so mean to her. Because, like, this is one thing in the Bravo sphere that I don't like or agree with is, like, if people don't like someone, they just go for the jugular. And it's like, ew, that's just, can we not? You know, it's like you're being so hard on someone based on a snapshot of like what you're watching of their life. And I don't love that approach unless we're talking about Juan Dixon, and then all bets are off because I just cannot stand that man. And I think Robin deserves better, if I'm being honest. But listen, we have to let Robin have that. She needs to, you know, if she's happy, she's happy. And then Monica goes on to say, so I'm going to issue a trigger warning right now because this was something really important that I didn't want to post on my Instagram, but Monica said that the reason why she and her ex got divorced twice was because of domestic violence in front of her children. And the show legally wouldn't let her discuss it, which, to be honest, I can understand that. But at the same time, I do feel like it's such a missed opportunity because with all of the stuff that Monica was bringing, I think that could have really helped some people, especially women. I mean, most victims of domestic violence are women. I think it's like 91%, and 99% of perpetrators are male. However, there are men who experience domestic violence. There are people who have they, them pronoun. This is not exclusive. I'm just sharing statistics. Okay. But my point is that I wish that we could have seen that journey for Monica or heard her talk about it. Cause I just think there's so much good stuff in sharing her experience, strength, and hope. But she says that is the reason why she divorced her ex for the second time. Okay, now on her relationship with her mom. This episode I did write down. So season 1, episode 13. If you have not listened to my episode on this, please listen. It's called Listen, Linda. And I talk about Monica's relationship with her mother in depth, which features a discussion about narcissistic abuse. And here's what Monica said about her mom. She said, my mom and I are done. We will never speak again. Which, here's the thing too. I feel like people, when they're immature, they speak in a lot of resolutes. They speak in black and white. I notice Candace does this as well. And so do I think Monica and her mom will never speak again? No. Do I think they're having a moment right now? Yes, I do. So Monica said, Linda came in to her home. So this is Monica's account. Linda burst into her home while Monica was in the bathtub. And what's with this cast in bathtubs? I've never seen such bathtub stands in my life. And Linda was recording Monica while she was in the bathtub. Monica told her to get out. She wouldn't. And then Monica had to call 911 to get her removed. And she said that her mom's last words to her were, you no longer have a mother and I no longer have a daughter. Now, do I believe Linda said that? Absolutely, I do. Absolutely, I do. Linda is wild. She definitely has some stuff going on. And if you want to hear me talk about it in detail, listen to Listen, Linda. I have too much to talk about today to go into that. But what I worry about is that Monica being pregnant, I worry about, sometimes people, you know what, let me just get into this now because I'm trying to allude to it, but this is really what I'm talking about here. Okay. So Nick Viall has this, it's called texting office hours. And apparently I'm not a avid listener to the Viall Files, so I didn't know this, but it's texting office hours. This is a segment that they have where, and this is a quote. He said, we offer as friends, offer as friends, not through expertise, but through our mistakes. through what we've learned through trial and error, this is the lens in which we offer advice to our callers. So essentially, Nick has people who call in and they can see, I think it's a Zoom because Monica made comments about seeing the person's face. Here's the problem with this segment is that there was a caller who called in with very serious family dysfunction, especially with her mother and father. Okay. And as a therapist, I did not expect this to be the most interesting part of the interview for me. But I got to hear this woman talk about her very toxic family and cutting off contact with them, and Nick making some very problematic, very uninformed comments that really had me activated. As Lindsay likes to say, it had me activated because the problem with what Nick's doing here is he's offering advice as just like a friend, but then he's giving it in ways that I'm finding he's not qualified to give it, right? He's saying here, like, I'm not qualified to give it, but I'm still going to give it anyway. And so I'm going to share with you a snippet of what this was all about. Because this was wild. And okay, so the synopsis is this woman, I'm not going to say her name. She's 33. She cut her parents off a year ago. She's married for 15 years. She has a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. Okay, so here's a synopsis and here's some of the facts of what this woman called in with. And then I'm going to share kind of what Nick and Monica said that had me really concerned. Okay, so a synopsis here is the caller called in to ask for advice about being estranged from her parents. Nick and Monica talked to her and discussed parenting challenges as this woman was processing her childhood trauma, essentially. I think this segment was almost maybe it was 45 minutes. So that's why this episode was so long, right? Because the first 30 minutes, he talked to Tyler Cameron. And then the last 2.5 hours were Monica, but then almost 45 minutes of it was this caller as well. So what the caller has stated is that her mother, father, so in her family, she has no contact with her paternal grandmother because of verbal abuse. Everyone in the family is estranged from her biological brother for the last 6 years. And there's a sister that she doesn't talk to and is estranged from because the sister validates the parents' toxicity. Okay. So let me be really clear as a therapist, that first snippet of information, Monica and Nick are not qualified to be giving advice on this. This is a family, I can tell you, just hearing that little snippet, this is for a therapist. And specifically, if I had a call-in show, which because people do always want me to take call-ins and answer questions, but the reason why I don't is because legalities and stuff are really tricky when you're giving people advice. And so what people will often do is to get out of that legality loop, they'll give advice as a lay person, but this is not lay person advice needed. This is someone who should be talking to a therapist. And by the way, she is. This woman said, I talked to a therapist and she's got that. But here's what's so wild to me about the main reason this caller called in was because Nick has this wild stance about no contact with parents. Like he's not an advocate for it, which I'm going to talk about that in a minute. A lot of people are not advocates for no contact, and they are people who had probably normal parents because no one has to want to have no contact with a parent. Nobody wants that. But sometimes for people, it's life-saving and it's necessary because even though Nick he said, thank God I had normal parents. Well, there's a lot of people who don't. And not only do people not have normal parents, some people have parents who are flat out dangerous to their mental, physical, emotional health. And so if you're not one of those people, mazel, great. But don't crap on people or judge them for having to save their own life and cut off contact with a family member. It's just like there are people who just don't understand what it is like to be raised by someone who's dangerous. who has true psychopathology. And if you don't know what that's like, congratulations. But if you do, you're probably doing slow claps right now as I'm saying this. So some of the caller, here's some of the complaints that she included about her family. So her family has consistently violated her boundaries. An example of this is her mom didn't agree with the fact that she was having a small wedding and sent save the dates behind her back. Are you joking? This one incident is enough to be like, that's bonkers. That's a no for me, dog. Okay. Then her father specifically sounds like he has some real anger management issues. And she said he mocks her as a parent to her child because, toxic masculinity, there's a lot of generational trauma with men of older generations that, right, we have to remember there were men who went to war, came back, who were told, suck it up. Don't talk about what you're dealing with, live your hell internally and take it out on the people that you're, who you love and who love you. Like that is literally the intergenerational trauma that leads to this type of behavior. And if it wasn't him, it was his father or his grandfather or whoever before him that started this toxic pattern of don't feel things, don't grow, and just be miserable and just take it out on people, right? Like that's a lot of that's in a lot of families. There was another situation where her mom gifted her shampoo, then stole it, but lied about stealing it and gaslit her and then blamed it on her 2-year-old child. Yikes. I mean, to me, I'm not going to lie, out of all of the the things that have happened, that for me is the most clinically interesting. And you might think that's odd, but here's why. When someone is lying about something so small and nonsensical and then doubling down and then willing to gaslight their own grandchild, I mean, that's like a level of pathology that's really runs very deep. And then the last thing the caller said is that there was some sort of event and it was very confusing. But the point is that the dad and mom were coming to her house. The husband had to leave because the parents were running late. The caller called her parents to say, hey, you guys are running late. Should we just go without you? The dad told her to shut up and hung up on her. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. No one should talk to you like that, let alone your parent. And hanging up on you, pass. Then they picked her up. Okay. He starts driving erratically because he's angry. Also huge red flag. Okay. Like that, putting other people's safety in jeopardy because you're pissed off. Huge red flag. Okay. So she called him out on it. He flipped the car around, drove her back to her house, and then dropped her off. And then she kicked her parents out of her house and she hasn't talked to them again for the past year. Now, the major issue here for me was she said that they still have visitation with her children. And the caller essentially said that she was waiting for them to impact her. So essentially, and I understand what she's saying, she is scared to cut off contact because everyone is judging her, which Nick did judge her, and I'm going to talk about that. And it never feels good to have to cut off a parent. And if you're a healthy person, cutting off a parent, you feel like an asshole. You feel like the person who's like, wait a second, am I being too harsh here? Am I missing something? Like, it's easy to gaslight yourself. Okay. So my point is that she's waiting for her parents to do something to harm the child because she's so afraid of what society is saying about what she's doing. And that was the only real problem I had with it, because if you can't trust your parents to be safe with you, in my opinion, you cannot trust them to be safe with your children. However, in my real life practice, I actually had someone, and I'm not going to say any identifying information, but who had a very similar issue. Very similar. And I worked with this person for 2 years, did a lot of the same stuff that this caller's therapist did with her, wrote a letter to the family that was appropriate, that was kind, that was effective communication. Family continued to violate boundaries. And at the end of the day, this person had to remove the child from their grandparents because of their consistent inability to be mindful of boundaries. Okay. Be mindful of and respect boundaries. And so that's what this woman did. She went with her therapist. She wrote a letter, and all of this stuff. And so Monica said, and here's the interesting stuff. So Monica said, "This is beyond you and me, Nick." And the caller said, "This is why I called. I wanted you to see the perspective of a family like this. I have given them a lot. I've tried so many times. This hurts, and I want a mom and dad, and I want support." The caller called out Nick on his stance about parental no contact and pled with him to understand how dangerous it is to perpetuate blind parental advocacy. So let me share with you some quotes that Nick said, and you can draw your own conclusions. So Nick talks about not being a fan of no contact because as a parent, he's parent-centric. Ugh, eye roll. He said, "I'm protective of parents in general as a new parent. We also live in a culture where we all find reasons why things aren't our fault. We are all talking about childhood trauma, and I'm very lucky I have great parents. I know parents aren't perfect and make mistakes." Okay, so here's why this irritates me. Nick came from a healthy family dynamic. He does not understand the need for survival to have to cut off a parent. And so I think it's very easy. And also some of what Nick says to me does sound like boomer talk, if I'm being honest. It sounds like this very old school, archaic view of parents know best. They need to be tough and harsh to teach us lessons. And I think this culture is just whiny crybabies about trauma. That's what I hear. And so perhaps that's not what he intended, but that's what I hear. And I'm just going to say that is a bag of bullshit. Trauma is trauma. And yes, not everything is trauma. Yeah. And sometimes even when we've experienced trauma, we have to be accountable for our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Yes, to all of those things. But I don't like the overgeneralization of, well, everyone says it's trauma. And it just sounds very archaic. And I worry that the people who listen to that podcast, I worry about the messages that they heard. So this part of this podcast is to help challenge some of those messages and help people who have no contact with family understand there is no shame in your game. You are doing what you need to survive. And I don't want people like Nick to make you feel bad. So that's what I'm here to say. So Nick said, is it worth not talking to her over shampoo? Bruh. You missed the entire nuance of that discussion. Okay. It's not about the shampoo. It's about the lying. It's about the gaslighting over something so silly. So you should be saying that towards the mother. Okay. That's a wild thing to say to the caller. Now, Nick also said to the caller, "Why didn't you try to mend fences?" Which is such a problematic response, because here's the thing. Nick kept saying parents aren't perfect, blah, blah, blah. There's a difference between parents aren't perfect and some parents are dangerous. Okay. Sometimes we cannot lead with love and mend fences. That's Nick's whole thing. He always wants to lead with love and he always wants to mend fences. And to that, I would say, I am so grateful that you have never had to encounter people who you can't do that with, because those of us who have, and those of us who have a parent who is a dangerous person, be thankful that you don't know what that's like, because sometimes love and mending fences isn't the answer. Okay. And yes, parents aren't perfect, but some parents are dangerous. And I'm just going to say that. Okay. Nick said, cutting off parents isn't an ideal move. Okay. So no duh, right? No. And this caller saying it's not ideal for her either. But so he said something that truly pissed me off to the point of, okay, I'm just going to read it and then we'll go from there. He mocked the caller, truly mocked her for breadcrumbing her parents and said, if they died tomorrow, blah, 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 blah. Okay. This was so unfair. And he said, there's always a happy medium. And I want to scream, no, there's not. You are speaking from a place of privilege, of healthy family privilege, sir. There is not always a happy medium. Sometimes there is. I have worked with people who have had parents who are, problematic, and they are able to maintain some contact and understand who their parent is, and it's not harmful for them or their child. Sometimes people can do that, but not everybody is safe enough to do that. And I just feel like mocking someone for breadcrumbing, which is not at all what she's doing. Like, Nick is saying that it's ridiculous that you're letting your parents still see the child if you don't think they're good people. And so part of that I agree with, but also the part of it he's missing, because he's a friend and he's not a professional, is that the hurt in this woman's voice as she's talking about this, right? Sometimes we make decisions from places of hurt and trauma. And are they the best decisions? No, but they're not malicious because they come from a place of just being hurt and not knowing which way to go. This woman was desperately pleading with Nick to help to understand her. And so my message to her was, don't call in again. He's not going to understand you. He doesn't want to understand you. This is not the show for these types of calls, because to me, it only served to invalidate her and make her feel bad, if I'm being honest. Because what some of the stuff he said was right, is that, I wrote here some of his green flags. Sometimes we do have to adjust our expectations of our parents. This is accurate. Sometimes we do have to forgive our parents for limitations. Our parents have limitations, and sometimes they do not give us the love that they need, but they're not bad people, right? Those are limitations you can forgive, right? Those are situations where you can say, gee, my parent and I, we don't get along, but we like to do this together, or we like to golf, or we like to whatever it is, and we can bond over this, and it doesn't negatively impact my life. Okay, great. However, this is only the case for healthier family dynamics. And so Nick himself said, in the situation with Monica and her mom, that is a good example of where you should have no contact. Monica and her mom need to not have contact. Monica's mom cannot abide by her boundaries. Monica said that she asked her mom to get off of Twitter and stop talking about Monica, and she just couldn't do it. Monica said that she started treating her daughters the way that she treated Monica, and that was a deal breaker for her. And guess what? To that I say, Monica, you're amazing. You rule, and way to go. And to me, this caller sounds like, listen, every situation with parental no contact is different. As I say, all humans are like snowflakes. We're all different. We're all unique. All situations are unique. And even as a therapist, right, hearing about this woman's situation, I kind of treated it like a case study too, by the way. So for the therapists and professionals listening, if you want me to post it, I will, as like a case study, because it was just, oh God, sometimes I miss grad school. I'm such a dork. But sometimes when you're looking at a case study, we're missing some of the nuance. We're missing some of the behind the scenes. So even I can only give my best interpretations based on what I'm hearing. And Nick certainly is in no place to do that. So a couple of other things that I'll say before we end here. So the caller talked about doing gentle parenting, and Nick bristled, like audibly bristled. And here, Monica's response was, don't ask me because I'm Latina. It's immediate yelling. And so the thing is, Monica was actually very kind and sweet with caller. She was empathetic. She was supportive. She was kind. And she really did truly validate her. She gave her good advice. And honestly, I think she helped way more than Nick, if I'm being honest. But the problem is, as Monica's about to bring a child into the world, and, there's this view about gentle parenting that it's like new age bullshit, and it isn't. Gentle parenting, and let me be clear, it's not, there's extremes like you see on TV where, a parent will let their child kick someone in the shin and then just be like, oh, I understand that's what you feel you needed to do. No, that's not gentle parenting. Gentle parenting is just understanding your children are people. and treating them accordingly, treating them like their thoughts and feelings matter, and not just punishing them blindly and harshly, having conversations with them about why you did what you did. And I promise you, this new generation of people is going to be better off for it because of the changes they're making in gentle parenting. And I don't like Nick's kind of bristle, his boomer bristle about, well, kids need to be accountable. No shit. Kids do need to be accountable. They need consequences. They need boundaries. They need to learn. But the way to have that happen is not to have a 3-year-old sit in the corner staring at a wall for an hour. That's not it. Because then the child doesn't understand what's wrong. They just understand that they're being punished or that their caretaker is mad at them. Okay. So this woman, if you're listening to this, contact me because I think you're amazing. I think what you're doing is amazing. And I think you just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, I'm not giving advice because I don't even know her. I'm just here to validate and say that I think she's amazing. And I think that Monica, to go back to the gentle parenting, she joked about immediate yelling. And here's the one thing I'll say about this. When we are raised with certain problematic communication styles, we do perpetuate those. But being Latina or being anything is not an excuse for that communication style, because I think Monica needs to keep in mind little Monica, how little Monica felt when she was constantly yelled at for making a mistake or when she was constantly yelled at for little things. So my hope is that through this process, Monica grows, she evolves, she learns to, have a style of communication that is a little bit healthier, a little bit more helpful. And that's kind of, that's it. So here's the last thing I'm going to say. My overall interpretation of Monica is that she had very high energy. She was argumentative. She was whiny, and she was kind of overall immature in her communication. There was one, I didn't get to talk about everything, but she was talking about her and her friend Tanisha. There was like a car chase. It was like so immature and so wild. And Monica was talking about this car chase and she said, skirt, skirt. And I thought to myself, you're 39, skirt, skirt. And she said it, how so the thing is, I have a 17-year-old niece, right? She's even mature enough where she would never say that. Kids today, they say it like in a way, and I'm not even going to imitate it because I'm 43 and I'm going to sound wild saying it, but it's slang for it's just slang. And Monica, when she said that, I just thought to myself, it feels like similar to Rachel. She does not feel 39. I would say she doesn't even feel 29. I think that Monica's definitely stunted emotionally, but I think that she deserves better. I think that she is a kind-hearted person. And I think that hopefully as she changes and grows and evolves, I would like to see that from her because Monica's not inherently a bad person. But I don't want to see her take this villain hat and run with it because sometimes people who have a history of trauma and not getting the love they need, they don't care if the attention they get is positive or negative as long as they're getting the attention. And I said this on social media and someone questioned me and they're like, does it matter? And I'm like, of course it matters. Negative attention is not what we want. We don't want negative attention for being loud or getting in fights or telling people how it is. That's not a good thing. So anywho, this is going to be the end of it for me. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. Please, if you're enjoying this podcast, please go anywhere you listen to the podcast and give a 5-star review. I greatly appreciate it. Please follow me on Instagram, Your Bish Therapist. If you would like to join our Bish chat and come and kiki and, get a little access to some things before I post them, then please do. I also have a supporters club on Spreaker. I'm going to be releasing an episode this week just for subscribers. So if you're a subscriber, tune in because I know I keep saying I'm going to do it, but it's been a wild couple of weeks for me. So this week I am going to do a subscriber only episode. Both are $5 a month, by the way. And also there's no expectation. You don't have to do any of that to support me. I just appreciate, the love, the support, the clicks, the downloads, anything, kind words. I just appreciate all of it. So there's more than one way to support me and it doesn't have to be financially. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Okay, so I guess that's going to be it for me today. And thank you all very much. I adore you all. Thank you for your support. And please remember to take care of yourselves and each other. Disclaimer: posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Bish Therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and are not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Greyheart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, or hear on YBT podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.